Hi, it's Blaine from Chicago.
How's it going?
I'm okay. I'm calling because yesterday I was a little perturbed by the Libertarian call you got. He mentioned that he wanted you to agree with him that welfare would cause dependency.
Yeah,
And
he just called back and trying to make the same
oh,
argument.
oh, really? I wasn't listening. I was listening to the phone. So anyway, I found that argument interesting because I'm looking at a report here from the Department of Health and Human Services, which says that the average family size for welfare recipients is the same as for non-welfare recipients, which sort of undercuts this argument that they're just having children to get more welfare. And I also find it even more interesting that the same report says that the average family size of welfare benefits was 4 people in 1969 and dropped to 2.4 in 2010, which to me really undercuts this, evidence-free theory that people on welfare are just doing it for the benefits. It seems to me like people in welfare are having a hard time and reacting to that, cutting their family size. That's not a pro-welfare dependency action that they're taking part in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that data is pretty clearly debunks his theory. I would also argue that the reason why you're seeing that is probably a function of better education and better access to contraceptives. I mean, the idea that people calculate. I mean, I suppose it's conceivable that there are individuals who have done this in the past and will continue to do it in the future. But the idea that there's any significant number of people who calculate like, I can have a couple more kids. I can just have, I'll just do it on welfare, as if that is some type of like that meager existence is something that one would. I mean, what possible value could there be to be someone to do that? It's just absurd. It literally is just an absurd theory. But
well, what's really amazing is if you look at black women in particular, you'll see conservatives, Larry Elder in particular, Thomas Sowell, they're fond of quoting that. I think the current rate for single parent black households is 76%. But what they never tell you is that that's because the birth rates for black women have just cratered for married women. So the percent is increased, but the absolute numbers of both has dropped. So they point that out, that and welfare as being the destroyers of the black community, when in reality, black people are actually less likely for any given level of poverty to accept welfare. So there's no argument there to be made, and they don't have any evidence. They want you to just listen to their theory, think that it sounds like it makes sense and believe it, but you ask them for evidence and it just falls apart.
Send me the links, will you, at majorityreporters@gmail.com to that HHS report.
Sure.
I really appreciate your calling in, and it was very fortuitous because hopefully Greg is still listening, because he just called in and he now realizes that everything he was saying and quoting, in fact, he was quoting Sowell, is complete bunk. And you did.
Oh, really? Okay.
You did a better job of it than I did, and I appreciate it.
No problem.
All right. Thanks again for the call.
I think part of the problem is just there's this, I forget who came up with this terminology, but there's the idea of telling systemic stories to understand things versus thematic stories. So as an example, what so often happens is most of those stories just come down to, well, I met somebody once, essentially. Like, right. So I knew somebody who one time supposedly did
Reagan's, I saw that young buck in the supermarket buying a T-bone steak
and
with
those are the
food stamps.
Yes, that's all the time. I see it especially with people in my age range and slightly younger, slightly older, especially. They know that one person, that one family in their neighborhood who gets some sort of benefit, and they see them buy a phone or buy some sort of nice food one time in like a span of months. and they go, "Oh, look, that person is
But the
taking
important-
Or
advantage
the
of the
surfer
system."
dude that was on that Fox
That
report
was
about the guy who's
actually
like, I'm
pretty
not
awesome.
working, I'm just hanging out surfing, man, because I get the welfare.
That was actually amazing. I, from my perspective, I thought, what kind of entrepreneurial chops does this guy have through a combination of government subsidies and everything else that he pretty much apparently doesn't have to
Right.
do anything. But the serious point is that inability to look at structure. And every time libertarians call or that argument is made, there's just obsession with anecdote after anecdote after anecdote after anecdote, and never a willingness to say, like, well, what's the big picture of the history as an example of the
Right.
African-American family in the United States? And there's some
Well,
terms
anecdotes
of
are
dealing with those
much
problems.
better in informing your perspective of the way that incentives, your theory about the way that incentives drive people. Because all you need is that one anecdote to prove that, yes, it's possible that someone could, be driven to have more children if they think that they can get welfare. And if you make it harder for them when they have children, then over time, people will absorb this lesson from their neighbor who's struggling so much that they won't have children. It's just absurd. It's just absurd.